Well, talking about international standardization, when we talk about standardization with UV appliances or sunbeds, we are talking about a standard with number 60335-2-27, and we will have that in different levels of the standardization bodies. You see here the ISC logo. This is the international level, the International Electrotechnical Committee. And we have a European logo. This is the CENELEC, the European standardization body on electrical appliances. And for example, in Germany, they are covered by the DIN, as well as in Great Britain by the British Standard Institute or the CEI in Italy, and so on. So we have these different levels of international, European, and national standardization. And what I try to bring to you today is what is the process behind such international standardization, to tell you that the standardization is not alone in the field of regulation of the business with sunbeds. There are additional regulations in different countries. I will especially show you the content of the newest European standard, which is the EN 60335 from last year, from 2013. And I will also give you a small view to the future, so what's coming up next in this field. Actually, whenever anybody has an idea how to enhance or improve a standard, it just can give a proposal to the international community, and this proposal will be directly given to the ISC, to the international standardization body, and the responsible body for sunbeds is Technical Committee 61. This Technical Committee 61 deals with all household appliances, dishwashers, irons, electrical fans, and sunbeds. So it's quite a variety of different appliances and therefore standards. At the moment, we are dealing with 109 different standards in this area. So whenever somebody has something to propose, he will give that to this technical committee. This technical committee consists only of electrical engineers from around industry, test houses, and maybe some authorities. And they don't have too much knowledge about UV. So therefore, there's a group, this is called the maintenance team MT16. They have really experts for UV, and they can give knowledge from science, from the field, from the business to these electrical engineers, and therefore, whenever such a proposal occurs, it will be forwarded to MT16 to ask them for their technical expertise. And so they gave it back to TC61 with additional expertise. There it is decided how to go on with this proposal. And if they say, yeah, okay, sounds reasonable, and it's going on, then the first thing, the second document which is spread out in the world is a document for comments, a DC. This DC is sent to national committees, and they have to look in that, make up their mind, and come back with some comments on that. So that next thing is national comments on a DC, and for sure that's going back to the technical committee. By the way, we need about 1 year to come from a proposal to this step. So after 1 year, the first comments from the national committees are received by the technical committee. Again, they don't have too much knowledge, so they give it to the maintenance team. The maintenance team adds some expertise on the comments, and then it's discussed in the meeting of the TC. And if it's still supported by the technical committee, there will be a third document, and this is a committee draft for vote. So now the national committees can comment on this new document as well as they can vote on it. Do we like it or don't? And for this process, we need another year. So it's from the first proposal up to now, we are talking about 2 years. For sure, this has to be sent back from the national committees, again to TC61. It will be dealt with MT16 again, and then TC61, if it's still supported, gives the fourth document out, and this is the final draft for international standard, the FDIS. So there's no possibility to comment on FDIS anymore. It's just yes or no. So we are coming to an end. Still, that needs about 6 months. So after 2.5 years, there's a final voting on that. And if they say yes, then it's only 6 months that we finally receive an international standard. So 3 years from the first day up to a new standard being available on the market. All these standards are always, as I said, with the same number. Here it is a standard published by the IEC, and it has always the year of publication at the end. So we have as a fifth document this IEC document, and such a document needs, as I said, about 3 years from proposal to publication, and it is immediately valid in the world. So as soon as it's published, this standard is valid, and it's the only international standard you can use. All older issues are out of order at that moment on an IEC level. And as you see, as much I pronounce that, there might be other levels where it's different, and we come to that later. So we have an international standard now, but the process is still not ready, because now we have to go to the regions, and our region is Europe. So this international standard will be sent to a technical committee in Europe. It has the same number, it's TC61, but it's a different organization behind it. It's a Senelec organization. There is no group with experts and so on that level, because Europe says, okay, it was already discussed by the expert internationally, so we don't want to discuss that with experts in Europe again. But we have a lot of additional requirements which we have received from the European Commission, and therefore we have in Europe an issue manager who tries to merge the ISC standard with common European modifications. So that just brings what the ISC has published with what has to be used in Europe into one document, and then this goes from the technical committee out as an FPR with common modifications to the member states, to the national committees, and they can vote whether they like it for Europe as well or not. So this is another 6 months that it's going to voting in Europe. If they vote positive, bring it back to the technical committee, then it will be published, and it will be additional 6 months until publication. That means 4 years after the first idea, we will have a European standard. The point is that the European standard has, in contradiction to the ISC standard, a legal aspect. So if you live in Europe, you have to follow that standard. That's different whether you live in Brazil, you don't have to follow the international standard. You might adopt it, but you don't need to. In Europe, you have to adopt it. So that means that all member states have to follow this standard, and therefore it has to be published in the member states' languages. So next process starts, it has to be published in the member states, and the European Committee gives a DOP, a date of publication, to the member states up to what day they have to publish it. So that means normally this is about 6 months. So after the European standard is there, you have 6 months to translate it in German or in French or in other languages, and then publish it and bring it to the market. And in contradiction to the international level, it's not that this new standard is to be followed at the moment. The old standard keeps valid until even and also given a date of withdrawal for the old standard. This means you have a certain time when two standards are valid at the same time. The new one, which was just coming in from the European level, is valid following the date of publication, but the old one, which is existing since 5 years, 10 years, or whatever, will keep valid until the date of withdrawal. So have it as a graph. The new standard is coming in. The national standardization body has about 6 months to publish a translation, for example, a DIN standard, and then it's normally about 2.5 years that the old standard keeps valid, and only after that time the older standard is going out of the market. So this one here is the solely valid standard only 2.5 years later. So that means standardization, whenever you have the idea for a change, that will take about 4.5 years until it can be used. And it needs about 7 years until the older version of the standard cannot be used anymore. This is quite a long period, right? So whatever you say, but standards are only the agreed, out-of-date, state-of-the-art of technology and safety. It's always outdated when it's published and when it's valid. That's a pity, but that's true. Anyhow, if you look at it on the long run, everything lasts about 7 years. But if you took new ideas in it year by year, then you will have an upcoming increase of product safety over the years. So therefore, it's still a very good idea to go into standards, even if it needs a long time to come to that. As I said before, standards are not the only regulation we have to follow. There are different European member states who have added additional laws and regulations on sunbeds. In Germany, there's the UV-Schutzverordnung. We have a decree in France. We have some regulations from the Radiation Protection Authority in Sweden. There's a Real Decreto in Spain, which is even signed by the King of Spain. He is very, very interested in regulation of sunbeds. I always say, okay, as long as they regulate sunbeds in Spain, they have more people going to the beach. But okay, there's something in Finland and so on and so on. The point is that all these regulations are just going on top on the standardization of the units. So all these regulations give additional requirements on the usage of sunbeds, or limit sometimes even the UV types that can be used in a member state or in public of a member state, but they do not interfere to the technical requirements of the standard. And this is very important, that all technical requirements are always coming through the standards into the markets. As I said, we have just received a new European standard, and it's just in the transition period to the national standardization. Actually, this is just the adoption of an international standard from 2009. And if you might look at that, I told you just about 2 minutes ago, it's about 1 year from ISC to Europe. Here it's from 2009 to 2013, that's 4 years. So they gave us a hard time in the last 4 years because they did a lot of bureaucratic problems on this particular standard to try to phase it out of Europe, but at the end it was accepted and is now published in Europe. What's new there? We have some additional instructions. So that means the statements which has to be sent out with the UV appliances are added in a few points. So, for example, the statement that the UV appliance shall not be used by persons under the age of 18. Well, actually, this is in all regulations already in, and it's now just an, information to the user. Okay, if you are under the age of 18, you should not use it. There's a statement that if you have asymmetrical or irregularly shaped molds larger than 5 millimeters with different colors and maybe even irregular borders, you should not use it or seek medical advice. It's just the chance of getting some skin diseases out of this is just increased if you have such kind of molds. There's a statement that persons not able to tan at all or persons that burn easily when exposed to the sun should not use a sunbed. You might have heard about skin types a lot with sunbeds. Actually, the standard is not dealing with skin types because skin types do not have any effect on the purpose of these appliances. The purpose of this appliance is to give a brown skin, and that is not depending on skin type. But if you are not able to tan, so why should you use such a appliance? It will only give you irradiance, but no benefit. And also, if you are too easy with developing a sunburn, you should stay out of this as well. But it's not, as it's interpreted quite often, that skin type 1 and skin type 2 is excluded from sunbeds. Only if you don't tan or if you get easily a sunburn, then you are excluded. It's quite difficult to bring that into the head of the one or the other politicians. We have an additional statement which is absolutely logic but was not in the standard before, and that is just don't expose yourself to more than the minimum amount your skin can withstand at the moment, because then you get skin burn, reddening of the skin. This is measured as a minimum erythemal dose, and it's just in the standard, don't get red. Logical, right? So we have added another one, and that is if you get red, which by mistake can happen sometimes, you will see that in 16 to 24 hours, and if it do so, please wait about a week before you start tanning again, which is also something logical to get your skin relaxed and to be able to start some exposure again. We have had in the past a lot of problems in the interpretation of the measurement process in the procedure in the standard, and this is now clarified. And the thing is that we are going to model the human body now with a half cylinder. Actually, this is quite logical. If you look at me, if I'm there, you see this bowl over here. Oops. And if you look my back, this is quite flat, so you can model this quite well with a half cylinder. And this is exactly what we do. We lay down the body on a sheet of acrylic, and then we measure on a surface like a half cylinder, and this half cylinder has a radius of 30 centimeters or 300 millimeters. So you measure on the surface and you measure down through the acrylic. If you look to the head, actually my head is a bit smaller than my belly. So we have another model over there. We have 15 centimeters, which is on a socket of about 5 centimeters. So that more or less model this length, which is about 25 centimeters, and this around 15 centimeters. And along the whole sunbed, we just follow those two surfaces and find out where in a sunbed, either here in the head area or here in the body area, on these half cylinders is the point of highest irradiance. And exactly this is measured. This is true, or this is followed by for a laydown unit, like it is shown here. But we do it with all others as well. For example, here with the sitting appliance, we have the radius of 300 millimeters, and just following the shape of the seat, it's just adopted over there. And it's the same with the stand-up unit, just measure it on a 30 centimeter circle around the middle point. The next thing which is changed is the exposure time schedule. As I said before, the exposure should not be based on the skin type. And we know that since about 6-7 years, because the FDA, which is the Radiation Protection Authority in the US, they have performed some studies, and they found, hey, the safety of a sunbed might be regulated by the sunburn. So whenever you have more sensitive skin, so you get an early sunburn, you should go lower with the dose. But if you look on the positive effect, if you look on the effect to get a color, then it does not depend on the same process, and therefore it's not depending on the skin type. Actually, the truth is, the darker your skin, the better you tan. So you need less exposure if you have a darker skin type, because you have already pigments in your skin, and they can be colored much faster than others who are very light in their skin and need to develop pigments first, which can then be darkened. So these studies at the FDA clearly showed that it's not depending on the skin type, and that only the sunburn effect is based on the skin type. And therefore, as long as you are below the sunburn threshold, you will always get a good amount of color independent of your skin type. And therefore, the new exposure time schedule is based on that concept. We start with the first exposure, and this first exposure is about 100 joules per square meter. This is not a tanning exposure. This is a test exposure. You just do it to find out whether in between 48 hours you get any unexpected side effects by adopting UV to your skin. It's just for that reason, to find out whether the person who's going to be irradiated can withstand UV without side effects. So after 48 hours, nothing happened, then you know, hey, I can tan, so I can go in there further and start really tanning and exposures being high enough to get a tan. Nobody will get a tan out of this 100 joules per square meter. So the second exposure should be smaller than 250 joules per square meter. And the reason for that is that we know that the skin reddening with a skin type 2 starts at about 250 joules per square meter. So whenever you have persons going in and they are able to tan, they will not get a skin reddening as long as they are below 250 joules per square meter. Unfortunately, some years ago, The European Commission brought in an additional requirement, and this requirement is that the second and the following exposure should not be shorter than 10 minutes. That means if you use an 0.3 watts per square meter unit, it has to be more than 180 joules per square meter. So it's a bit tricky for the second exposure. You have to be between 180 and 250 joules per square meter. But it's possible to go in there for sure. We have additionally a maximum dose for an exposure, and this is 600 joules per square meter, because that came out of the study at the FDA. If you increase to 700, 800 or more, this will not increase the 10 at all. 600 joules per square meter is enough. Whenever you get more, it will not give you any additional benefit. So therefore, out of performance reasons, this is a really acceptable maximum value. We have also a maximum dose per tanning curve, so that means 10 or whatever exposures in some weeks, and this is 3,000 joules per square meter. We have additionally a maximum yearly dose, which is measured in a different way, so it's NMSC measured, and it's 25 kilojoules per square meter. I know that dealing with this joules per square meter is quite difficult, so therefore I have made some calculations, and if you look on the European 0.3 watt per square meter appliances, what does that mean? 100 joules per square meter, this is 5.5 minutes with a 0.3 unit. So the first test exposure, 5.5 minutes. The second exposure should not be longer than 14 minutes, but has to be longer than 10 minutes. So it should be somewhere in between. The maximum dose, 600 joules, corresponds to 33 minutes in an 0.3 appliance. A complete tanning course is about 2 hours 47 minutes, and you should not exceed 40 hours of artificial tanning in a year. So this is a general requirements on exposure time schedules, and now you can just go into that and see how to manage it in real life. So it's clear the first exposure is always 100 joules, it's always 5.5 minutes. Test exposure. But then you can start, for example, like that. You have to go up here at least 10 minutes, and you can, for example, follow this very linear increase in tanning from 10 to 26 minutes, and you are still at the end, you end up with 3,000 joules per square meter. So this is exactly what's allowed by this exposure time schedule. You can do it in a different way. You can do it with a two-step option, for example. You start with 100, you do one step, you keep it for 8 exposures, and then at the end, you give whatever is possible, 23, 22 minutes. You can do it with a 3-step option. Do it 4 times with 11 minutes, 3 times 17, and then full power. Or what I like most is a very simple 3-step option with 3 exposures, and it's even a good calculation. You start with 6 minutes, you increase to 12, you increase to 18, you increase to 24. So always 6 minutes more. 3 times 12, 18 or 24 minutes, and then you are in the maximum you can get out of such an exposure schedule. Just for comparison, if you look at Germany, there we have also exposure time schedules given, and this is given by the UV-Schutzverordnung, and they have based it on skin types. So again, this linear idea to increase exposure. Skin type 2 in Germany, it's not allowed to give more than the 100 joules per square meter. So actually, they will not tan at all. Skin type 3, it's closer to it, but it's not going to the same amount of overall doses. But skin type 4, this is more or less the same as what is allowed with the European exposure time schedule as well. So to shorten that, what is relevant for the studio operator in Europe? We have now a very clear measurement procedure, and there will be no more discussions with authorities in the future. I know that was in Denmark. I know it from the Netherlands. Authorities were coming into the studio, performing some measurements that, wow, it's much too high, but they just don't follow the procedures, the measurement procedures. Now it's absolutely clear, and they have understood how to measure a sunbed in the right way and how to figure out where the point of maximum irradiance is. And it's possible to provide these new different exposure time schedules, and it's really something which is going into performance, that it's not based on skin type anymore. It can be used as long as you don't have national regulations which contradict that as it is in German. Okay, what's coming up next? You all have heard about red light appliances, and actually they will be introduced into the standard. We think it will be about 2015 that we have that in the standard. It's based with not giving additional new limits, because we have already limits on such appliances based on a different standard, but there will be a clear standardized measurement procedure for these appliances, and especially the electrical and mechanical safety of these appliances will be identical to that of sunbeds. We have a good knowledge and very good experience with the electrical and mechanical safety of sunbeds for the last 20 years, and we are just transferring that to the red light appliances as well, so that they have, from the start, they have a much higher level of safety than bringing it into an additional or new standard and learn year by year how to increase the safety. It's now already there. Good. So, question from my side is, any ideas, any wish to contribute from your side? I know it's at least two and one former member of MT16 here at the moment, so we have some expert here knowing what we're doing. Yeah. Any questions? Good. Whenever they might come up, contact the convener of MT16, that's me, or the issue manager in Europe, that's me. And if you try to contact me, just use this address or telephone or email. Okay, thank you, and have a good show. And it's still open for questions.